Welcome to the last session in this course. This session will be on your research proposal, assessment of that proposal, and the ethics approval process. In other words, I will summarize what we've done so far and it will show you how to demonstrate your learning in this course. Let's remind ourselves of the rest of the sessions in this course. We started with a preamble, face-to-face session on how this course was going to be run, followed by 4 online sessions on introduction to research and basic terminology, literature review and topic identification, research orientation and strategy, and research designs and overview of the research methods. In other words, your first online session was about the kind of language that we're going to use in the course and that you are expected to also use in your dissertation. Then about how you could identify a topic and narrow down towards a research aim and objectives against the background of an existing body of literature. Then once you've identified your topic and identified your contribution to a particular body of literature, the third and the fourth online sessions were about how you are going to implement your research study, your proposed research. What followed then were 4 sessions that were face-to-face with experts using particular research methods in their everyday research activity, and the ones we thought would be most useful to you were experiments and analytic surveys, case studies and interview-based research, use of databases for research in your field, and event study methodologies. The time has now come for the last session on how to pull all that content together, demonstrating your understanding and, more importantly, your ability to use everything we've taught you so far, everything you've learned in this course. In a nutshell, your research proposal will look something like this. It will have 3 parts: an introduction, in which you provide a background to the topic area and really an idea as to why this matters to you and why this should matter to the marker and to the audience you're addressing this to. Then section 2 is a review of the literature, both theoretical and empirical. Section 3 consists of your methodology and methods. So methods would be about how you're going to actually go about doing it, through what sort of methodological tools, for example, interviews, surveys, experiments, so on and so forth. And as far as methodology goes, how you can justify the use of those methods. So chapter 1 would be an introduction. Then your literature review chapter will be suggestively titled Literature Review. And finally, your chapter 3 will be Method and Methodology. This is really, in a nutshell, everything you've learned so far. So a structured view of things sometimes helps, doesn't it? Let's look at each of them in turns. In your introduction, you will identify the research problem of the proposed study. In other words, what is the issue that needs resolving and that you found to be as compelling as to embark on this task? And what is the general background of that research problem? It isn't necessarily a literature-based background, but perhaps a historical, context-based background of the problem. So I would use in the introduction more content taken from the news or from everyday life than I would literature. Having said that, you would need to touch upon the literature a little bit when you identify your research questions, your research aim and objectives. So what we're after in your introduction is not only the research problem, the overall societal or economic problem, a business problem that you're about to solve by doing your research, but also you need to narrow that down using the ABC rule into a feasible research aim and objectives or questions. You'd also need to persuade the marker, persuade your audience that the research problem you're about to solve or you're about to get to understand better is interesting, relevant, and important. It isn't enough to say, I want to do this because no one else has done it. There may be a good reason why nobody else has done it. You need to tell us that nobody else has done it, or nobody else has done it in the manner in which you're going to do it, and the manner in which you're going to do it is really good, is really promising or interesting or relevant to a particular problem which needs to be solved. So this is your opportunity to put a bit of your heart really in your research proposal, and then based on that in your dissertation. Now, after you've put a bit of your heart, you need to test your commitment to that enthusiasm through the review of the literature. They say that any good project can be killed through the review of the literature, and they say that for a reason. If the first part was drawing on your enthusiasm and your sense of commitment to a cause, this second part of your proposal is really testing your perseverance and ability to build upon your arguments to finally be able to solve the problem you set for yourself. In doing so, you need to review as systematically as possible who has done work in the area you've chosen, since when and how, what theoretical arguments they have expressed in that area, what empirical evidence is available in that particular area. Indeed, some scholars would have approached the area of your interest theoretically, whereas others would have done it empirically. We need to get a sense of both in your literature review. It is also important that your review of the literature covers the methods and methodologies previously utilized in that area. There are research areas where particular methodologies dominate. So if you are going to choose a different methodology for your own research, you'll need to come up with a good reason for doing so. So whether or not you choose to follow tradition in that particular line of literature, you need to provide some sort of a feel of how other people did a similar type of research as you are going to. Finally, and perhaps most importantly, your literature review needs to end with a section on gaps in literature, gaps in knowledge, what theoretical, empirical, and methodological gaps exist in the extant literature, and how your proposed project intends to contribute to covering that gap. It doesn't need to cover it entirely, it needs to cover it to some extent, but it needs to bring a contribution. Finally, your third chapter of your proposal is very important because it actually tells us what you're going to do. So to devise this third chapter, you need to actually look for potential data and tell us where this data is likely to come from. So what methods you propose to implement, on what research orientation can you justify the choice of those methods, how, where, when, and in what way will the data be collected, how it is going to be analyzed, and what are the strengths and weaknesses associated with the method or methods you are selecting, and really give us a feel of your understanding of those particulars, because there is no method without its weaknesses. So you're not confessing to something you don't really want to confess. You're really showing understanding and awareness of the strengths and weaknesses coming with any method, hence the one you're selecting as well. And finally, some sort of a timetable for conducting the research would be able to tell us, your marker or your markers, as well as your audience, that the plan you're putting forward is feasible, is doable. So this is, in a nutshell, a typical structure for your research proposal. It is very useful to see it in one slide because it helps bring everything we've learned in this course together in one coherent picture, hopefully enabling you to take charge and do it for your own proposal.